This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. I'm your host, Dakota Arsenault. This is now the day after the 97th Academy Awards at the time of recording, and we are here to recap our thoughts on the ceremony that named Anora Best Picture. Joining me today is Alex Southey, who runs the Substack Play with Rabbit Ears, which reviews films and TV shows with an emphasis on Canadian content. He was last heard on episode 295, the 2025 Oscar nomination reactions. Welcome back to the show, Alex. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's a good, I got to be there for the reactions, and now I'm here for the reaction to the actual event. So
it's all full circle.
Yeah, poetic. It's poetic.
Well, before we get into the recap, I want to reveal the winner of our Oscar draft from episode 299, where myself, Thomas Stoneham Judge, Brody Cottenham, and Alex Watson drafted movies we thought would win awards. I had the first overall pick and couldn't decide what the big winner would be, so I picked The Brutalist over Anora, which ended up being wrong. I ended up with 5 points as I scored wins from both No Other Land and A Real Pain 2. But the winner was Alex Watson, who got 5 points from Anora and additional points from Conclave and Flow. Thomas tied me with 5 points, getting a pair of points from both Amelia Perez and Wicked, and an additional one from I'm Still Here. Unfortunately, that means Brody came in last place with 3 points, getting 2 from Dune and 1 from The Substance. I also went 15 for 23 on my Oscar prediction podcast. I actually changed a few of my predictions on my personal ballot I filled out just before the ceremony started and did even worse, only getting 13 out of 23. My guest on that episode was Elizabeth Malloy, who also got 15 out of 23, so congrats on us for tying. Alex, did you fill out a ballot? Did you make any predictions?
No, sometimes my family does that kind of thing, but we didn't this year. I don't know why. I don't have a good answer for that, but no, I didn't. But I, of course, followed quite closely and sort of kept a score in my mind, so to speak. Not an actual number score, but just like where I thought the night was going and where it ended up going.
Okay, that's fair. When we last spoke, we were sort of reacting to the nominations, and I was beginning in earnest my Oscar death racing journey. And I feel like for you, your biggest blind spot was A Complete Unknown. Did you end up catching up with that or any other films that were nominated before the ceremony?
Yes, I did. I made sure to watch a few more. I have to admit, I'm only a quarter into The Brutalist right now, but I'm sorry. All right. And Complete Unknown, I watched 4 days ago. Not because I was putting it off until it came out sort of available on streaming, and then I watched it because I'm a terrible person. And yeah, okay. I mean, is that where you want to start? Or I thought A Complete Unknown, I was surprisingly happy. I was pleasantly surprised. I was concerned. I do have issues with it, but overall, solid 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, depending on how into Dylan you are.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of putting it. Yeah, that was just the one I was curious about because you talked about how big of a Dylan fan you were.
For sure.
That you hadn't seen it yet.
For sure. Yeah, my takeaway on that is essentially I was even more impressed with Timothée Chalamet's speaking voice as Dylan than I was singing. Singing was fine, but we've heard a million good to bad impressions of him singing, right? So I figured Chalamet could do something okay, and it was good. But the speaking, the sort of sneer / mutter / shy, it's sort of, Dylan had such an odd way of speaking. And Chalamet did a really good job of that. I guess my issues with it were, you need to orchestrate certain life events in slightly more organized, clean ways so that they produce the greatest dramatic effect. That inevitably that happens, right? But I just thought Elle Fanning's character, I know she was supposed to be a composite character, but mostly based on Susie Rotolo. And I just didn't, I don't know. It was almost like a waste of an actor to me. Like, Elle Fanning is a good actor, and I just thought, this isn't a good enough character, in my opinion, and it should have been done differently. But Monica Barbaro as Joan Baez was awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
And Pete Seeger and Ed Norton as Pete Seeger. Yeah. I was shocked at how good he was. I think Ed Norton is a good actor, but I consider him, a charismatic character actor that rarely ever plays someone so soft. And Pete Seeger was so soft. He was like a sweet uncle figure or something. It was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about Norton because he often doesn't really play such gentle characters. Like,
No, he
he's
usually
played
plays
nice guys
biting.
before. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
He always has a bit of an edge to him.
Yes.
Now, I guess, let's talk about the actual awards. And
Sure.
I guess we'll start out with, we'll sort of wrap up our thoughts on A Complete Unknown here. It went away with 0 awards. It was one of the more nominated films of the evening, and it didn't end up winning anything. And, when I was filling out my ballot, I didn't pick it to win anything.
Mhm.
I looked at a lot of the categories it was nominated in, and I was like, well, you're probably maybe second place or third place in a lot of these, but they had no real front runner. Were you sort of surprised after watching the film that it ended up getting blanked, or do you sort of understand, agree with it not winning anything?
No, it's funny. It's one of those things where you hear the sentence, "They walked away with nothing," or whatever, and you go, "Oh, that doesn't sound right. Like, it's a good movie. It should have won something." And then, like you're saying, you actually look at the nominations and who they were stacked against, and it kind of wasn't as good as any of the other, people who won ended up winning. And so it's kind of fair. I think it happened as how it was supposed to happen. Chalamet should not have won. It's great he was nominated, but he didn't deserve to win. And I also feel it's going to be kind of a Leo DiCaprio thing where he's got like 50 or 60 years ahead of him for a career. He's going to be fine. If he keeps on this trajectory, he's going to win not one, but probably multiple Oscars. So this is going to be far in the rear view for him in just a couple of years. So yeah, overall, I think it's right that they didn't win, but it's too bad because it was a good movie. It just had really steep competition.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's talk about Anora. I led off, it did win Best Picture, ended up winning 5 awards, which was the most out of any film this past year to win. And we get a record where Sean Baker wins 4 Oscars, which to me is just absolutely mind-boggling. He ties Walt Disney for the single most awards being awarded in one Oscar ceremony, but he also now holds the record of being the winningest person from a single film, because when Walt Disney won, it was for 3 different shorts and I think a song. So it was for 3 or 4 different projects that he won his Oscars for. Whereas Sean Baker, it was all for Anora.
Yeah.
Which is, absolutely shocking. So it wins Best Picture, Best Director, Best Editing, Best Original Screenplay, all for Sean Baker, and then Best Actress for Mikey Madison. As sort of the night went on, it was like, ooh, I think we know what's happening here. Okay, I think Anora's chances are growing and growing. It was for me after, I think it was when it won Original Screenplay, which I thought was a bit of a toss-up category. When Original Screenplay went to Anora, I was like, okay, I feel like this is very beneficial for Anora's chances. And then when it won Editing, I was like, okay, you can lock it in. It's winning both director and picture. Even actress was a bit of a surprise to me. But what was your sort of reaction to Anora being the most winningest film last night?
I'm pretty surprised. Not because I think it's bad. It's obviously an excellent movie. People are firing on all cylinders there. Mikey Madison is great. It's a star turn for her, very much so. Sean Baker has been sort of working within this general space for a lot of his career, and it sort of feels like a culmination of a lot of that experience. Overall, I still thought it was a surprise that it won so as much as it did, and my enthusiasm, I must admit, kind of curdled by the end. I was thinking, this might be one too many. I wish that the awards had been fanned out a little more, especially some of the ones like Best Original Screenplay. Not to say that it was a bad screenplay, it was great, but for example, I thought A Real Pain was maybe better in terms of just screenplay stuff. Maybe even you could argue the substance from like a plot way, but I don't know if that was nominated. Actually, I can't remember. I feel like it was, but yeah, mostly I'm happy for them, and mostly that's less about the people who actually worked on the movie and more what it means for hopefully independent movies being greenlit and sought out a little more by studios. Because didn't they say this movie was made for like $6 million? And for people listening, millions of dollars is obviously a lot of money, but in Hollywood and in movie making, that is a very small amount. And similar to The Brutalist, obviously that had far more well-known people in it. But I think that is also considered an independent movie. So decent year in general for independent movies. I didn't think Enora would be the heavyweight.
Yeah, that was a surprise for me. Despite the fact that all the precursors leading up to the Oscars were pointing to signs that Enora was probably going to be the big winner, I was still being a little bullish on it, where I thought The Brutalist was going to inevitably still win Best Picture. I predicted The Brutalist for picture and Sean Baker for director. And my sort of rationale wasn't that I thought one movie was better than the other, because I actually do prefer Enora over The Brutalist. My rationale was the Academy has never really awarded such sex-positive films like Enora in the past, especially for Best Picture, where more often than not, it seems to be a bit more of a conservative pick, because it's a lot of people going like, oh, this is the movie that's going to represent us as an organization, for better or for worse. And so that's why we often get safer picks. Sometimes the safer pick ends up turning out to be really awful, with things like Crash and Green Book and Driving Miss Daisy.
Yeah.
And sometimes the safer pick ends up just being a movie like Coda, where it's just a fine movie, but for better or for worse, this is the representative of the Academy going forward. And so for me, it was a huge surprise. I was like, I just don't think they're going to give it to a movie that the subject matter is an Enora.
I agree. That's a really good. I didn't think about that, but it's a really good take on it. I am also a little more cynical too about it, where I think it's not like it was a movie about, a gay sex worker or a trans sex worker, or, you know what I mean? It's still at its heart like a very beautiful woman doing a lot of nudity and doing a lot of. I'm not saying that's the reason it was nominated at all. It has commentary and a lot of a great story to tell and so on, and does a lot for representation. But I am a little bit cynical just in that, like, I don't think this is that out there if you take like a macro view of everything. Yes, they're normally very puritanical and afraid of sex in any way. You're right. But this is like the least amount they could have put their toe over the line. So it's basically about whether or not you want to reward them for that or not.
That's a very fair point. And like, imagine if Sean Baker now followed up Enora with Tangerine, a film from earlier in his career. That's not going to get the same love and attention.
Perfectly.
Even if it was
exactly
made on a higher scale budget. Yeah.
Exactly. That's all I'm trying to say. And I'm not trying to disrespect anybody who participated in the movie. The acting is great, but it's just like, there's also a lot of eye candy to go along with the progressive points they are making.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point there. For me, I think a big surprise was Madison winning over Demi Moore.
That was the biggest surprise, I think, for me personally too.
Yeah, and I think like sort of looking back, it's like, yeah, we all loved The Substance, and leading up to award season, I was like, if it even gets a nomination for hair and makeup, I'm going to be pleasantly surprised. And then it ended up getting, 5 nominations total, which, was a huge overperformance, not by quality standards, but by, holy crap, the Academy actually nominated The Substance, a body horror comedy movie, to the highest levels, including for Best Picture and for Best Actress. This is crazy. And I think a lot of people that are upset sort of maybe need to take a step back and be like, okay, this is still the Academy we're talking about. This is still a body horror movie, which the Academy has routinely overlooked and not awarded.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, are you saying there are people who are upset that it didn't win more?
Yeah,
And you're basically
specifically.
like, consider it a win. It made it to the Oscars kind of thing.
Yeah, where
Yeah.
where I think all of us that maybe got a little overexcited about a potential Demi Moore win have to remind ourselves the Academy doesn't like horror.
The Academy doesn't like horror, and also, with all due respect to Demi Moore, who did a great job, it's not like she was circling Oscars for the last 3 decades. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to call it a fluke. She clearly is capable of great acting, and I'm sure she'll follow this up with something interesting. But I just am saying, like, it's not like a Frances McDormand type, right?
Mhm.
This was already, she's overachieving just based on history, and her career. Maybe this will no longer look like overachieving, depending on what she follows it up with. But just in general, it's like, this person was never in awards contention very much anyway. So, like you're saying, it's not, one, not that surprising that she didn't win, and two, amazing that she made it as far as she did, as well as the movie, because of all the horror scarcity in the Oscars, like you're pointing out.
Yeah, and the Best Actress category as a whole is very interesting because of the 5 that were nominated, Cynthia Erivo was the only previous nominee. Whereas if you look on the Best Actor side of things, you had Brody, who is a previous winner. You have Ray Fiennes, who has the overdue narrative.
Yeah.
You have Coleman Domingo, who's previously been nominated, and Chalamet, who's been previously nominated. So that was like a much more stacked category, just purely on past performances. Whereas in the actress side of things, it was a lot more wide open, where, you know, the narrative is being like, Demi Moore, was she overdue? Mikey Madison, is she the next big thing? What's the sort of the push and the pull here?
I almost see it as, this is oversimplifying, but I almost see it as, okay, they didn't give Chalamet, the young upstart, his award, but they gave Mikey Madison, who's sort of on the flip side of things, her early career award. It's kind of a, you know, they couldn't have given it to both. I almost feel like that would have probably been seen as pandering to a younger generation or something, not even getting into whether or not you could objectively say it was better or worse than somebody else, which of course you can't. So I just thought, yeah, okay. So they did it with Mikey, but Timmy's got to wait a little longer, you know? And I'm not saying it's also that calculated, or maybe it's not that said out loud, but I think that might be the vibe.
Yeah.
My big thing, actually, if you want me to be honest, is Zoe Saldana totally should have been in the lead category, and she arguably could have won in that category. I found it all a little bit confusing, personally.
Yeah, we essentially have 4 lead performances that won this year, because I also believe Kieran Culkin was a lead too.
Totally. It makes zero sense that he's the supporting, but whatever.
Yeah, that's studio sort of gaming the system.
Yes.
And it worked for both of them.
Yes, it did. That's true.
I can't argue that, like, oh, why are they doing this when it's clearly works out for them.
Can't argue with it. And also, hey, I want both of those actors, both being Kieran and Mikey, I want both of them to get some wind behind their backs in their career and get more out of this. So if that's what this is, then whatever. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I found it funny where, like, specifically Zoe Saldana, who you mentioned there, I was looking it up because I saw the poster come across my my socials, and I realized she's credited first on the poster.
Oh my God, come on. Yeah, it's such a blatant category fraud, but whatever.
Yeah. Okay, well, who are the other big winners here? I guess, you know, Enora was the big one with 5. The Brutalist came away with 3.
Yeah.
As I said, I was predicting that it was going to win picture. I could have also won director too, but it ends up getting 3. 1 for Adrian Brody for actor, for best cinematography, I believe, yes, and for best original score. You know, it's hard to argue with these. I know you said you're only about a quarter of the way in, but, like, I'm sure even, like, just the quarter that you've seen, it's hard to deny the achievement of both the music, the composition, and the cinematography. They're so powerful and evocative. I think those are going to be 2 of the best wins of this era.
Definitely. I agree with both. I agree with that. They're sort of instantly notable, and so many, just speaking more about scores rather than cinematography, so many scores in this new era they go in one ear and out the other. We grew up, many of us with John Williams style scores or Danny Elfman or whoever else, right? And they're able to come up with scores that fit for a feature film and yet also kind of stick in our brains the way pop music does. And that is seems to exist less and less. I don't know why, but it's great that there are still some filmmakers treating it as, as a lead member of the overall group or crew, and not just sort of putting an equivalent of elevator music in there. So I'm glad for that. Cinematography is still kind of like a sexy award to people. I think people get, oh, this looks pretty. This is well composed, whatever. So it's a little more understandable. But yeah, no, yes, you're right. From the first quarter, you can instantly tell, even just the opening where it's Brody is walking through sort of what looks like a chaotic, dimly lit a warehouse filled with other people. Maybe they're immigrants, maybe you don't quite know right away. But then doesn't spoil anything. It's part of the first 5 minutes, I guess. But suddenly they're headed towards a light and you're going, oh, okay, they're leaving this tunnel. They're leaving this warehouse. And what it actually is them coming out of the side of a ship, I guess, or onto a dock that is Ellis Island of New York. And you see the Statue of Liberty in this off-kilter way. And even the fact that they chose to put it in this off-kilter way and didn't make it this grand shot of the city skyline and the Statue of Liberty, just that alone, you're thinking, okay, we're in the hands of somebody who's making very deliberate decisions. They're not sort of asleep at the wheel.
Yeah. And, I quite liked Brody's performance, but I think the one thing that anyone seems to want to talk about is the length of his speech, which for me, I've just got to say, people need to stop clutching their damn pearls. Like, yes, he now has set the record for the longest speech ever. But
oh, did he?
Every year, yeah, by a few seconds over Greer Garson from A Ceremony in the 50s. But like, they always give more time to the Best Actor and Actress winners.
Totally,
they always do. Like, are you new to watching the Oscars? If you're mad about this, like, it makes no sense to me. So, like, everyone complaining about this needs to, frankly, in my opinion, shut up about that. Was this speech?
I agree, like, in general. The only thing I'll say is when you say, I'll keep it brief, and then you don't keep it brief, you're inviting yourself for a bit of criticism. But overall, I agree with you. It's like arguably the most interesting award of the night, along with Best Actress or Best Picture. So you expect long speeches. It's only fair.
Yeah. And like, if you want to complain about the content of his speech, about, you know, fine, whatever. I'll agree with you. Was it a bit obnoxious and cringy at times? Yeah, it was. I don't care.
That's kind of his MO. He's an actor who wears his heart on his sleeve. And frankly, sometimes it's cringe. Sometimes it's not. The point is, unless he does something super fucked up or whatever, the point is he a good actor in a movie or not? And he was, Yeah.
And then the only other multi-winner films, like this year, the Oscars were very spread out in terms of wins. Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, and Wicked all got 2 wins, all of them technical wins.
Yeah.
You could say, unless you want to not count the song as a technical category. I sort of predicted Dune would get 2. They weren't the 2 that I expected, but they did get 2.
What were the 2 that you expected?
So it ended up with visual effects and sound, and I thought it was going to get visual effects and production design.
What won production design?
It was Wicked, and I thought Wicked was going to get sound.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. Yeah. I see the thought process there.
Yeah. But yeah, so 8 of the 10 Best Picture nominated films all walked away with at least one award. The only ones that didn't was A Complete Unknown and Nickel Boys, which, was quite surprising how spread out, and everyone sort of gets a little bit of love by the Academy this year.
Yeah, you know what? It's good that you said that to me, because my impression leaving the night was Honora, which we sort of, yes, that was the case, but
Mhm.
it was quite a bit spread out, which is good. Again, I'm just thinking of the overall health of the movie industry, and they can't all be Marvel budgets, you know? So I'm
Mhm.
glad that things like this are getting a little bit of love, even if it's just sort of an Oscar here or there, even if it's not one of the most prominent awards as well. Some of the things that I thought were the most interesting about the night, though, were these speeches from. Sometimes I look forward the most to speeches from people who are celebrated in tiny awards, like best short form documentary, stuff like
Mhm.
that, because that is the mountaintop for them. Like
Yeah.
these other people, to me, more sure, maybe she hasn't been nominated before, but she's probably been at the Oscars before and she's in Hollywood and she's, a celebrity. This is for those people who come from, Holland or they come from some other place to celebrate their small film. This is like big, big, big. And so I always like hearing from them. And so my two favorites were the first one was the Dutch Cup. I forget what they won for, but they were adorable and they were clearly partners in life and also filmmaking partners. And the woman, when she was speaking, turned to her husband and said, "I'm not going to give you another baby for this," referencing the Kieran Culkin thing, which was
Yeah.
really funny. And then the other one that I loved, obviously much more serious, and it's, yes, it is a small film in a way, but it's so powerful, is the No Other Land
Yeah.
speech, and both of those guys speaking. I was so blown away by that documentary. I was so moved, and it was weird. It's like I know that the Oscars are celebrities and famous people, but you get used to seeing some famous people. But those guys, I was like, oh, holy crap! Those guys are like on the ground in Palestine, seeing things happen day to day, and yet they're here right now celebrating this. It was almost more special to me. And I'm not saying special because the Oscars matter so much. I'm just saying special because it put a spotlight on them, which was really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the speech from the winners of No Other Land was probably the most heartfelt and moving one of the night.
And courageous. They're saying it to us, to a
Yes.
audience of US people, and they're going, it's partially your fault, like your
Hmm.
administration's fault. That takes
Hmm.
a lot of courage.
Yeah, and I haven't double checked, but I'm pretty sure when they announced them as the winner, there were a few unhappy people within the audience. I
Oh,
think
I'm
they
sure.
probably did their best not to highlight these people because it's bad for the bottom line for
Yeah.
ABC to do that.
Yeah.
But I think there would be more than a few people that were not happy. But I was like, it was a fantastic speech, as you said, very heartfelt, very important, laying out exactly what the situation still is for them.
Yeah.
And the fact that one of the co-directors, Bassel Adra, who is the Palestinian one of them, talked about how he's now a father, and that was very exciting to hear that.
That
And how
was
happy that
lovely.
made him. Yeah,
Absolutely. So lovely that he gets this joy in the middle of what is obviously a kind of a brutal time for him. It
yeah,
must be, because it's, for anybody who doesn't know, that documentary sort of, yes, it covers the Israel Palestine, everything that's happening between those two, but specifically his Palestinian village that he grew up in and what's happening to it based on what the IDF are doing and the settlers. So just very lovely to have that, diamond in the rough of news.
yeah, yeah. Now let's switch over to more about the broadcast
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Conan O'Brien as host. This was his first time hosting, and honestly, for me, it was quite the breath of fresh air from Jimmy Kimmel. I always had preferred Conan over Kimmel, and even basically every other late night host. He's always been one of my favorites, and for me, he didn't disappoint. I think one of my biggest issues with Jimmy Kimmel is he would always be good for like 75-80% of the show, and then there would always just be like one segment that felt a little too mean-spirited, and it's like, what are we doing here? And Conan, I think, did a great job. While I think that separates the the type of humor that Conan and Kimmel have, where Kimmel's humor can be a little bit mean-spirited at times, and it works. It does work for him. Whereas Conan's sort of style of comedy ends up being more self-deprecating and turning on himself. And I think he did a great job of leveraging that at the Oscars. Of he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna let John Lithgow be the bad guy with his disappointed look." That was a hilarious bit. And overall, I think he did a great job. What were your thoughts on Conan's hosting?
Yeah, overall, I thought he did a great job too. And I agree, even though I think I'm probably, it sounds like, a bigger Kimmel fan than you are, I agree it was still a breath of fresh air. Sometimes you just need to change, even if you like what's there. You are spot on, though. There is a quality to Kimmel's humor. I think he's softened over the last 10 or 15 years and become a lot nicer, but there is occasionally some sort of punching down quality or mean quality to his humor. Do I think sometimes it's called for against the Hollywood people who are just treated like gods? Yes, I do sometimes. But overall, yeah, this was a breath of fresh air. You're right, Conan is a lot more self-deprecating. Some of it was hilarious. Like, I loved, first of all, having Nick Offerman as the voice was perfect. But especially the voice in his head, like, I don't know, that's a lot of pressure. It's your first Oscars kind of thing. That was really funny. And my only thing with Conan is, yes, he turns the humor on himself. I really like his wordplay, and he is a smart person, and I like him. I don't always love the silly humor. And so, like, I appreciated the joke they were making about we're not going to waste time, and all of the things that they're doing, they're wasting time. To me, that's funny on paper. And then watching it, it was like, let's say that gag lasted for a minute. It could have lasted for 15 seconds and had the same power for me. So I just don't love the song and dance aspect of Conan, but overall, I thought he did a great job, and clearly people really liked it. And I think he's built up a lot of goodwill, where I can't really think of anyone who has a problem with Conan other than Leno, maybe. So other than him, even more than Kimmel, I think he's sort of beloved by everybody. So he's a good choice.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. I think the I Won't Waste Time song was probably the low point of his hosting duties. And if that's the low point, like,
good point.
I'm fine. Yeah,
yes,
it's fine.
That's true. He was a little ballsy with that joke about Kendrick and Drake.
I was shocked he made that joke.
Yeah. But hey, whatever. Certainly in the zeitgeist. So I guess why not grab it?
I saw a funny joke on social media this morning. There's something along the lines of Drake is halfway through getting dissed at the EGOTs or something like that.
That's perfect. Yeah, we just need the Tonys and the Emmys, I guess. Wow.
Yeah. So there's one of the things that they did this year was they eschewed the normal performance of the nominated songs and instead just did other musical numbers. And there normally is additional musical numbers, especially from the host, which we already sort of talked about, the I Won't Waste Time one from Conan. Yeah. But there were the show opened with a Wicked medley, and then later did a James Bond salute. I
know. I wanted to ask you about that. Like, why?
I don't know. Like, the cynical side of it is, well, they just
sold to Amazon,
pushed the rights to Amazon.
Okay,
so they're now fully in control.
Yeah.
Is that it? I don't know. Is it, a salute to Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson for retiring? I don't know. Like, obviously, I feel like they would have been working on this for months.
Sure.
Whereas that deal was only announced a couple weeks ago, and maybe they had the heads up. But, like,
it's just a bit bizarre. I actually Googled during the award shows, and I was like, is this the 50th anniversary of something? Or is that?
Nope.
No, it's not at all. It's felt very, I mean, hey, look, Bond is sort of a cornerstone of modern Hollywood and action movies and stuff. So it's not that it's out of place being given respect at the Oscars. It's just a weird time to do it. But it was interesting. I liked that medley. Sorry, getting back to the medleys like you're talking about.
Yeah, specifically with the James Bond one, I thought Margaret Qualley dancing in the first bit was a little odd. don't know why her. Like, I love Margaret Qualley, but it was a little odd. And then of the 3 songs, I really like the rendition of Skyfall the best. I think that was the best of the 3 in my opinion.
Okay.
Did you have a favorite of the songs?
I liked Live and Let Die the best.
Yeah.
Specifically because I hate one part of that song, which is the like reggae, like what does it matter to you? I hate that. But the beginning and end of it is so Bond and so well written in my opinion. So I'm glad they only focused on that part. Yeah, not a big fan of that part, but overall it was cool. Skyfall was great. It's too bad they didn't get Adele herself, but I think she takes a lot like long breaks in between album cycles, so that could be what she's doing. Yeah.
And then the Wicked medley was fine.
What was the one they did at the end? Because
they did Defying Gravity, which is from Wicked.
Okay, but that was like before the last 2 awards or last 3 awards.
You're talking about the Queen Latifah performance, which was a tribute to Quincy Jones, where they did she did Ease on Down the Road from The Wiz.
Oh yeah, right. And okay, well maybe you want to wait until we get there, but all I wanted to say about that was it was psychotic to put a musical performance that late in the night when they were already over.
Yeah, and like I like Queen Latifah,
Same.
and I like that song.
And Quincy Jones is a legend. Like it's all deserving. Yeah. It just felt like a weird moment.
Yeah. Overall, it's one of those things where like it's sort of like I'm a big Saturday Night Live fan.
Same.
And the musical performance aspect, you can sometimes go months on end before there's an actually good notable one. The rest of the time they're just fine or they're bad. And it's sort of the same way with the Oscars, where they got to include these musical performances. They're not always going to be good, and you just got to hope that every once in a while you're going to have something legendary happen. And this year, I don't think something legendary happened between the Wicked medley, the James Bond medley, and then the Quincy Jones tribute. None of that really stood out as going to be the test of time sort of quality.
No, you know what was the most notable music moment? You know what I'm going to say?
The sand dune playing the harp?
No, that's real. That was a good joke, though. The in memoriam music. It was so foreboding. It was like death is coming for us all. Remember that. Yes. That's what it felt like. It was normally it's Blackbird sung by Norah Jones or something.
Yes, something like that. Yeah.
And it's that was a bizarre choice. It felt more like, did Stanley Kubrick direct this from the grave? Why this?
Yeah. So looking it up, it was Lacrimosa from Mozart's Requiem.
Okay, yeah.
Which cool. That's a beautiful piece, but I was not thinking about oh, I'm so sad this person died. It's like, oh my God, were they murdered?
Exactly. You're not thinking rest in peace. You're thinking this is suspicious deaths. Yeah. Bizarre.
Don't go into the house alone.
Yeah, exactly. Brief, very touching tribute from Morgan Freeman about Gene Hackman for sure.
Yeah. And, every year people complain about how come they missed this person from the in memoriam. I wondered if they were going to include Hackman or not, because he did just pass so recently before the Oscars. And normally they basically sort of lock in the in memoriam segment about a month before the Oscars.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So there's always people that are like, you missed this person. It's like, they died 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
This segment is done.
We'll get them next time, okay? They're still dead next year.
Whereas with Gene Hackman, he did win 2 Oscars. He was nominated for several others. I think he's the one type of person you make the exception for.
Definitely. When somebody like that dies, when they're sort of a giant, they will make an exception. It's no disrespect to the other people who were included. It's just Gene Hackman was the giant, What was the other? Oh, and I saw some people online today that were sort of upset that Michelle Trachtenberg wasn't included and stuff like that. And hey, don't get me wrong, cool. She was a staple of the early movies that I watched when I was growing up and TV. Do you really expect her to get something equivalent to Gene Hackman even? It's not going to happen. She's deserving of her own thing. It's very sad, but did you really expect a massive applause break at the Oscars or something?
Yeah. I agree with that, and I love her too, and was very sad to hear about her passing.
Totally.
It's not on the same level, especially since it was, like I said, they probably already locked in the in memoriam segment at that point.
Right.
Overall, I was I was very happy with the ceremony. It went on even longer than last year. I think last year's was 3 hours and 24 minutes. I think this was like about 3 hours and 40 minutes, something like that.
Well, 40 of those
remember what
minutes for
exactly.
Adrian Brody.
Yeah. But like overall, it was a fun Oscar ceremony. It felt
Totally.
like it was moving at a good pace. There wasn't any like seriously awkward or uncomfortable moments or really bad performances. And like I know we were just, sort of critiquing the musical segment,
Yeah.
but like they were all fine.
Oh, totally. There's nothing wrong with any of them. Yeah, just a bit lackluster, like you're saying. Once in a while, every few years, there's sort of something huge that happens, and nothing happened.
Yeah. So overall, I was very happy with this. I was happy with the winners for the most part. Like,
Yeah.
Anora wasn't my number one choice. Conclave was, and so it only won one Oscar for adapted screenplay. But at least I can say that my favorite movie won an award, and 8 out of the 10 Best Picture nominees going home with at least one award shows that I think a lot of people are probably going to be pretty happy with the Oscars as a whole.
Yeah, that's a good point. The more they spread out the love, the more people will be happier with how it happened. That's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think it also sort of speaks a little bit to, like, I know we all love it when something like Return of the King wins all the Oscars, or Titanic wins all the Oscars, but like that means a whole bunch of movies go home empty-handed, and I think not that those films aren't deserving, but sometimes I feel like some of the smaller technical categories sort of get swept up. Where it's like, well, I guess we're voting for everything Titanic this year.
Yeah.
It didn't really go that way. And yeah, maybe Anora overperformed a little bit. You can quibble and say that you think Conclave should have won Best Editing over Anora. Or whether or not you really believe Demi Moore should have been Best Actress, or The Brutalist should have gotten something there. I don't know, but like, I think it worked out as nice as we could expect if we're being nice and sharing the awards with everyone.
For sure. And also, I don't know, I think about the people who didn't go home with as much. Like, I'm sure there are going to be people complaining that The Brutalist didn't have a year like Return of the King or Titanic, because some people thought it, was this monolithic creation that was amazing. And I'm not saying it's not that, but like Brady Corbet is going to have a okay career after this. Like, getting all of these nominations and all of this goodwill and surge of popularity just from word of mouth, like, he's fine. He won in a way. That's how I feel about a lot of these people. Is I'm not normally someone who likes to advocate for what's the word? What's the phrasing for it? Like, pay as what am I trying to think of? When you're not going to be paid money, but you're paid in exposure. Exposure.
Oh, yeah, exposure.
But in this case, that exposure is really helpful. And I think 100%. They're going to get something out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, The Brutalist still won 3 Oscars.
Totally.
Speaks to Corbet's, direction.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. The big winners of the night are Sean Baker and Brady Corbet, two people who made films for minuscule budgets in the grand scheme of how much movies cost. And does this mean that they can very easily get their next movie financed in the $15 to $30 million range? No problem. Because like, I don't think we have to worry about Sean Baker. As much as I'd love to see Denis Villeneuve return to his like French-Canadian route to make small, intense dramas, he's not doing that.
No.
But we also don't have to worry about Sean Baker, directing the next Dune
or Marvel
or something like that. Yeah.
Totally.
Like, he's still going to do his weird offbeat things that like take a closer, granular look at people that society forget. And if this helps him get a bit of a better budget, so that way he can, get like 1 or 2 big stars in it, like he always sort of does, then that's a huge win.
I agree. And I almost think like maybe Brady Corbet is the type who would want to inch forward in bigger and bigger budgets, because clearly his vision is very visual as well as character driven. And Sean Baker is so character driven mostly that he can work on what is relative to other budgets, kind of a shoestring budget. And so I almost think for him, this success won't be, oh, great, I can make movies for more money. It's going to be great. I can worry even less than I did before, that I can still continue to make these, like you're saying, offbeat $6 million movies for the rest of my career. It almost is like more giving him a license to be have a career in my mind that is like Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah.
He just pumps him out. Nobody's really interfering. They make enough money. Actors really like him. Just let him do it. That's what's probably going to happen for Sean Baker.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, do you have any sort of final thoughts on the Oscars this year? Anything that we haven't touched on yet? Anything like that?
Well, this is just your Oscar reminder that they are not actually indicative of quality, and they are good for people's careers and good for sort of a temperature check on what was big in that sort of crossover section of film people and general public. But other than that, other than as a weather check for the film industry or what's popular, just remember it's not actually indicative of how good something is. Mikey Madison isn't suddenly objectively a better actor than Demi Moore just because she won, right? It seems silly to note, but I think a lot of people get really like wrapped up in this. And
I think that's a great point. And like every year when I start doing these Oscar podcasts, I point out, yes, I know these are silly.
Yeah, right.
But like I have fun with it, and people involved seem to like it, and so this is fun. This is just fun. Don't take this shit too seriously.
Absolutely. And almost what I said would be better as a preface, because I don't want to end it on a feeling of, just so you guys remember, this is stupid. You know what I mean? I like starting out with it, because then you can move forward. We can all go, yes, we know in the grand scheme of things, this is not a big deal. But we all acknowledge that. Now let's treat it like we care, because we all do care in a fun way.
Yeah. This is stupid, but isn't it cool that Flow, a little movie from Latvia, won Best Animated Feature?
Exactly.
The smallest studio to ever win. That's cool.
That is cool. And there are some heartwarming stories that come out of this, I guess, overall silly thing like that. It's a feel-good thing for countries like Latvia or people who, like we're talking about.
I think I'm Still Here represented Brazil's first win for this category, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Although, no, did City of God win? I can't remember. I probably should have looked this up. But I know Brazil historically has not done very well in the international / foreign language film category. So, like, it's big for them, too. Like, this is a cool thing.
Definitely. I'm surprised to hear that about Brazil. But I mean, hey, honestly, I heard, what was it? Somebody, I forget their name, but somebody won last night, and they were a black man, and they won for, I think, set design or
no, it's for costume.
For costumes. Yes. And I thought, what? Like, this kind of record is still being broken by people? Like, it's still, it's 2025. But then I also thought, I don't know, like, obviously there's more sort of diversity in the roles we can see, because there's more attention provided to that. And there's not as big of an ecosystem or online, rah to get these smaller awards or these behind the screen things, more diversity, even though of course that is equally important. It's just not as, people focus on what they can see, and they can't see that, right? So anyway, I just thought, wow, there's still quite a lot of work to do, just when you think things are shaking out okay.
Yeah. The person that you're referencing there is Paul Tazewell, who won for Wicked for costume design.
Yeah, okay.
Ruth E. Carter, who won for both Black Panther films. She was the first Black person to win Best Costume Design, and Paul is the first Black man to win for Best Costume Design. But still, the first Black Panther movie only came out a few years ago in 2019, the grand scheme of things. And, it's now 2025, and it's only the second person to win this. Like, crazy. Crazy.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
All right. Well, I think this is a great place to sort of wrap up our thoughts. I'm about to take 2 weeks off and then get into where I'm going to finish the season strong with my favorite films of the year. I'm going to do my top 10 list. And then it's right into Canadian Screen Awards season, which hopefully you're going to come back on the podcast and talk about Canadian Screen Awards, because you love Canadian movies as much as I do, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. But forgive me. When are they? What's the actual weekend? What's the weekend they're airing?
Oh, off the top of my head, let me see.
Off the dome.
I don't know, but I'm pulling it up now on the Google. They take place on March 26th that week. Okay, so I think it's
Whoa!
so
I
like
didn't realize they were that soon.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, that's exciting. Yeah. No, I would love to cover that.
Yeah. I've got a couple people that really love Canadian cinema, and you're one of them. But Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure, just like that first time you came on. So I'm excited to have you back again.
Totally. Thank you so much. This was a real pleasure. I was about to say a real pain. This was a real pleasure, and I appreciate it. I can't wait to come back. So yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, where can people find your work, and is there anything that you've put out recently that you want to promote?
Sure. Yeah. So as you said at the beginning, my blog on Substack is called Play with the Rabbit Ears, and I cover, it leans towards Canadian stuff, but it's kind of everything, and it's movies and TV. And the other thing I guess I'll say is I have a podcast myself. It's more in the music. One is more in the music realm called Your Worst Song. I have Canadian musicians and bands come on and talk about, amongst other things, what their worst song is, which is kind of a fun thing to talk about. And I've had notable acts like, members of Blue Rodeo, Dan Mangan, great acts. So give that a listen. And then the other thing, I've started a second podcast called The Human Interest Hour because I didn't want to be hemmed in by just music, and that was happening with the other one. So in this case, I've released 2 episodes so far. The first is with a Toronto historian named Adam Bunch, which is really cool. I'm a historic. I was about to say I'm a historic guy. I'm a history guy. And then the second episode is with Farbsy, who is a internet personality, became popular during the pandemic for doing these little sort of short skits on TikTok. So that was fun. And it'll probably be out by the time this airs, I guess. But I'm going to have Jesse Wente on, who's a writer and activist. Yeah. And so that'll be a really cool conversation. So look out for that.
Yeah. No, I really like Jesse's work.
For sure.
I will link to both of those in the show notes as well for people to check out. But yeah, thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
This has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. Follow the show on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at ContraZoomPod. What were your thoughts on the Oscars? Leave a comment on Spotify or send us an email. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.